Ron Weasley didn't deserve Hermione. I've always said it, this movie is yet another piece of supporting evidence. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jake, the Scary Story Guy, and today we are taking our first venture into the Shyamaverse with M. Night Shyamalan's new film, Knock at the Cabin. Now, I am of the opinion that our boy M. Night is the most fascinating filmmaker of the last quarter century. The man is a total enigma. You go into every new M. Night Shyamalan movie wondering if it's going to be one of the best movies of the decade, one of the worst of the decade. It's all on the table. Now, I don't often admit this to people, but 2 of my 10 favorite movies of all time were directed by Shyamalan. I have a list. I call it my Hall of Fame because I'm an enormous dork. And Unbreakable and Signs are in the 8th and 9th spots on that list. Maybe even Signs and Unbreakable, depending on my mood. And we haven't even gotten to The Sixth Sense, The Village, Split yet, all of which I think are phenomenal movies. But, you know, there's also...
Plan on murdering me in my sleep?
What? No!
And if that's not enough, then there's those other 2 that were so critically panned I couldn't even bring myself to watch them. Look, I'll say this for Shyamalan, he's always gonna go for it. There's not a cell in that man's body that says to him, hey, M. Night, maybe take it easy this time. And for that, I will always respect the hell out of him, and I will pay to see every movie he makes for the rest of his career. So Knock at the Cabin is an apocalyptic, maybe, movie starring Dave Bautista, Jonathan Groff, Rupert Grint, and others. And the first part of this review is going to be spoiler-free. I'll probably keep that fairly brief because, oh man, we gotta talk. We are diving into some spoilers in the second part of this review. Speaking of spoilers, by the way, the trailer for this movie shows an awful lot. I was expecting the movie to kind of go in a completely different direction, because, you know, twist ending, M. Night, that kind of thing. But I did come away feeling like the full trailer was far too revealing, so don't watch it if you haven't already. What I'll say vis-a-vis this film's premise is that we have a gay couple and their young daughter vacationing at a cabin in the woods, and then 4 people knock on their door carrying both weapons and strange intentions. Dave Bautista is really great as the leader of this group. He's unquestionably the heart and soul of this film. He takes the character in some really interesting directions that I frankly didn't realize he had in him. He's just such a magnetic stage presence. You never want him to stop talking when he's talking. I was very impressed by him. I gotta admit, I've kind of always viewed him as a Walmart version of The Rock. I didn't know he could do this. He's a fantastic actor. I actually thought all the performances were pretty good. I think Shyamalan's not exactly known for giving his actors dialogue that they can like shine off the screen with. But there was no one in this movie that I was like, yeah, you know, this isn't really working for me. Rupert Grint is in this. Good to see our boy Ron Weasley still getting work. He plays a total asshole here, by the way. Just like he did in the Harry Potter films. Movie Ron haters, rise up. And actually, now that I mention it, I don't think the dialogue here is nearly as bad as in some of his other movies. Old, the one that came out a couple years ago, the first 20 minutes of that movie are just comical. Here, I at least didn't think it was distractingly bad. There's more good to say here. I can truthfully say that I was not bored for a single second of Knock at the Cabin. There's not even really like that kind of beginning exposition. We just dive right into the action and the ride does not let up. It's also incredibly well shot. All the scenes inside the cabin, it's a very claustrophobic movie, mostly one location, but Shyamalan really makes the most of that location. There's one scene in particular with Dave Bautista and an axe that I was just like, hell yeah, that ruled. I think my main gripe with this movie, honestly, is that it just could have been so much better. I really did come away just feeling like, wait, that's it? Which you expect to feel a lot of ways after a Shyamalan movie, but that's not necessarily one of them. I think a lot of things weren't explained well enough. Some other things were over-explained, and yeah, ultimately just a lot of potential was left out on the floor. I'm not going to forget the movie anytime soon, but nor am I going to remember it with any great fondness. Just more like, oh yeah, that was a movie that came out, which from someone with Shyamalan's track record is kind of a shame. I'm going to give Knock at the Cabin a fairly tepid 3 stars out of 5. It's entertaining as hell, but eventually becomes hollow and disappointing. Alright, spoiler talk begins now. So if you haven't seen this movie...
Move, children! Vamonos!
Okay, so as anyone who's seen the trailer knows, Knock at the Cabin is the story of a family who gets taken hostage by the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And don't worry if you somehow didn't pick up on that poorly hidden symbolism, because the movie will clunkily explain it to you. And basically this family is given a choice. Willingly sacrifice one of you, or the world will end. And for every time you say no, one of us will kill ourselves and bring another plague on humanity. So as they keep saying no, and as these 4 keep dying, one by one, eventually they turn on the TV and they show them like, hey, see this massive tsunami? That's a plague. That's you brought that. That's because you said no. And the trailer shows all of this, okay? And that's really all the movie is. So first of all, fire that trailer guy. One of my other gripes is that as this is happening, and as it starts to become more and more like, wait, are these guys actually telling the truth about the whole apocalypse thing? The main characters are not really like trying to get to the bottom of this. They're not asking any questions. They're just kind of like, you guys are insane, over and over and over again. And the 4 horsemen here, they need to work on like their sales technique or something. They're just really, really bad at explaining themselves. Like their whole job is you have to convince this family to make this impossible choice or humanity is doomed. And they're just so bad at it. They should have been like, hey, I'm about to kill myself. And when I do, the news footage is going to shift all of a sudden to coverage of a massive tsunami that hits Oregon. That's a plague. Instead, they're all vague and shit, like humanity has been judged, and then they kill themselves, and then they turn on the TV, and then all of a sudden, bam, there's a tsunami. And then they're like, oh, this is what I saw. And it's like, bitch, you could have said that about anything. And one of the plagues, it's kind of like they did say it about anything. Because the second plague is like a flu virus that kills more people than normal, but it's been going on for months, right? Like this is an ongoing news story. So how was that caused by the horseman's suicide that just barely happened, right? I don't know. Stupid. This movie had potential to be really disturbing in those plague sequences, the plane crashes and the natural disasters, and instead it just kind of ended up feeling like really low budget and cheesy. The news broadcasts of it could not have felt less realistic. Like, wow, look at this disaster we're seeing. What a disaster. And some people might call this a nitpick. I don't think that it is. So at the end of the movie, the apocalypse has been averted, and they're flipping through all the news stations to show kind of like the aftermath of these disasters. And we've just had planes fall out of the sky by the hundreds. We've just had the biggest tsunami the world has ever seen strike a densely populated area. Are we really meant to believe that mere hours after that, there is a news station anywhere that's running a story that's like, oh yeah, flu cases are going down. So, you know, most of this movie's one location. It should have been fairly cheap to make, which is why I'm disappointed that, like, these plague sequences, you could have really splurged on them, and instead they ended up being the weakest part of the movie by kind of a lot. They could have at least made it more intense, like when the horseman died, I thought. I mean, they cut away every time, basically, before anything was shown. And you come away feeling like this is a PG-13 movie that has an R rating. So if you're gonna, you know, tone the violence down, why not just cut out 5 F words too and make it PG-13 so it's more marketable? Also, I'm left with some questions that I feel like the movie was kind of like promising, working towards an answer to, and we just never got them. Like, how was it that the guy who attacked Andrew in the bar all those years ago just so happened to be one of the horsemen? Like, what was up with that? What was the figure that Eric saw behind Dave Bautista, right? How did he become convinced that the intruders were correct? Now, apparently the screenplay was based on a book, which is possibly why the dialogue doesn't feel as stilted as M. Night's normally does, but I actually just looked up the plot of the book, especially the ending, and damn. I feel like that would have been a lot better than the movie we got. I wish there had been a lot of suspense about, like, why are the intruders here? Or, you know, make it ambiguous. Maybe they're pumping in TV footage. We don't know if they're right about the apocalypse for a long time. This is all just pretty straightforward. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with a straightforward movie. It's just that when you've got Shyamalan and he's taking on the apocalypse, I think it's fair to expect there to be a little bit more than meets the eye. Alright guys, that about does it. So stay tuned for new videos every Thursday. In the meantime, if you'd like to read my latest original horror story, I'll put a link to that in the description. And as always, thank you for watching my video. Here's hoping you survive to see the next one.